Good morning, all, and welcome to another United Partners for Human Services workshop. My name is Justin Fitzpatrick, and I serve as the Membership and Communications Coordinator here at United Partners for Human Services. We apologize this morning about the link snafu that we had, but we're so happy to have you all join us. And thank you for working with us and being able to mitigate the risk and problems that we dealt with this morning, and hopping on really quickly to the Zoom link that we sent out this morning. But this morning's training is entitled Donor Cultivation, and it will be presented by none other than our Executive Director for United Partners of Human Services, Amber R. Tynan. We are also joined by our Director of Strategic Initiatives here at United Partners for Human Services, LaShawn Gordon. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get the presentation started, and we'll pass off the microphone to our Executive Director, Amber R. Tynan.
Awesome, Justin. And thank you. I know you're not feeling well. So everybody, please give him a round of applause for being so amazing and making sure that, all this is held down and moves forward seamlessly, even though he doesn't feel well. So I do appreciate that. I'm going to tell you guys right off the bat that I absolutely hate to present. So I'm better one-on-one, but we're going to make the most of it today. My team's always like, we're going to do this and it's going to be great. And I'm going to tell them, yes, of course, but I want you to know that it is not in my nature to present. So a lot of times when I am presenting, I just am very matter of fact with things. So if at any point in today's presentation you have specific questions or you want me to clarify or go in more detail in something, please let me know. And then if there's something that, I don't cover that you have questions about, please either come on off mute and ask them, put them in the chat. Feel free to interact. We'd love to have participation. But I'm Amber Tynan. I am the Executive Director for UPHS. I have been here 6 years almost next week. But prior to that, I spent a lot of time in development and fundraising. Fundraising is something that I think just, it is a skill, but it's something that just came natural to me because I really love people and getting to know what really drives and motivates them. But there is an art to it, and it's not something that I think everybody feels that they're good at, even though with the right skill sets, as well as competencies and just trainings, as well as professional development, I mean, we can all get to a place where we can be adequate fundraisers. So Justin, if you'll go to the next slide, what we're going to cover today is a couple of things. We're gonna level set on fundraising. I'm just going to do kind of a blanket, what it is, what it isn't. We're going to talk about the donor cultivation cycle, what it entails and how each piece of that cycle intersects with one another, but also what that means for you and your organization. We're going to talk about the art of relationship building because, quite frankly, you cannot fundraise successfully. You probably could raise money, but you can't fundraise successfully without being able to create meaningful relationships with people. And then we're going to go into what it means to create value for donors in your mission. But I'd like to level set, and our next slide, Justin, is, how many of you love to fundraise and feel you're good at it? You can either do a thumbs up, you can clap, you can do a heart emoji, you can react however you'd like. How many of you think you're really good at it and you really like fundraising in general? See one hand. Okay. But how many of you have a block or feel there's a barrier for you when it comes to asking for money, not knowing where to start, what to say, what to ask, how to connect with folks? How many of you feel like, I'll do it, but I don't really like to do it? I think majority of folks are probably in that latter bucket, right? Yeah. And that's okay. I think a lot of people feel the same way and have the same feelings towards fundraising. And that's okay. So we're going to talk about how you can fundraise and cultivate donors more successfully as we move forward. I'll use a lot of real world examples, but again, welcome questions that you have. So just a bit of level setting. If you want to change the world, you must know how to pay for it. So real change and impact requires resources. And I'm going to ask that you think of fundraising as an opportunity. When you fundraise, though, there are some key elements that you have to be mindful of as you approach the way in which you fundraise with your organization. And I think the biggest key to really ask yourself is what we're doing, is how we're raising funding, is what it's going towards, is how we're stewarding the gifts, is how we're putting those dollars to work in the mission that we have at hand. Is it ethical? If you can say yes to that, proceed forward and prosper. If you're unsure, then there's probably some elements to the way in which you're fundraising that need to be really analyzed. Um, so I just want you to be mindful of that. The other thing that I want you all to just recognize when it comes to donor cultivation and fundraising in general is that many people struggle with fundraising because they can't rationalize their own baggage with wealth and money. And because how you feel about wealth and money directly affects how you approach it, we have to address it. And what I mean by that is, if you grew up rich, you probably have baggage around wealth and money. If you grew up poor, you probably have baggage around wealth and money. If you're envious of others for having more money than you probably have baggage around wealth and money. If people with more money are better than you in your mind, then you probably have baggage. And if you feel guilty that you have more money than other people, that is baggage as well. It's first class baggage, but it's baggage. So you have to really understand your own relationship with wealth and money, and really be able to understand that more intensely before you can ever move forward and adequately fundraise with others. And the only difference between really wealthy people and us is that they have more money. That's really it. Don't complicate it. There's nothing more to it. And how do you then utilize that knowledge to help advance the work that you're doing? Giving people the opportunity to invest in an idea or program that's going to change the world. Why would we ever feel bad about giving somebody the empowerment or the opportunity to inspire social change? Just like we would never, feel bad about giving somebody a lead on hot stocks or a great restaurant we just patronized. It's really about how we frame what it is that we're doing when we're fundraising and looking at it as an opportunity for folks. So next slide, Justin. All right. So what is donor cultivation? This is finding and cultivating donors. It could be new donors, it could be current donors, but really looking at how you want to elevate or enhance their gift within your organization, knowing that this can be arduous and time intensive. A lot of organizations that do fundraising significantly well, they have a development department or they have development staff. But a lot of our organizations that we work with don't have that. They have one person or they have, volunteered staff. And they don't have the ability to really look at their donor base in a way that can allow them to understand opportunities for adequate donor cultivation. But it is necessary regardless of your size. And it's a 5-step process that allows you and your organization to find, engage, and retain donors. And it's a process that never ends, it just only repeats. So let's just jump right in. Next slide. So you'll see the 5 phases. It's going to be identification, qualification, cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship. And we'll start with the first one, which is identification. And this is the step in the cycle where you build a list of potential donors for your organization. And in order to really identify those folks, you should be looking at your organization's programs, because there's different types of donors that will be drawn to different things based on the programming you have. And for instance, you may have donors that are very rooted and specific in supporting a food pantry you might run. And then you might have other donors that are more so interested in a housing program you may run. So really understanding your organization's program and service offerings will really allow you to really narrow and identify groups of people that have an interest in supporting them in various ways. Effective lead generation is driven by identifying the right opportunities. And what we oftentimes don't remember is that 90% of our fundraising efforts come from 10% of our donors. So we oftentimes think we have to spray and pray and cast this wide net, when ultimately, if you get very strategic about your approach and what it is you're asking for somebody to support, you oftentimes have those individuals already within your donor base that are going to help you really raise the significant amount of money that you need to operate effectively. So just remember that it's not about, spraying and praying and spreading very wide. It's really being strategic and narrowed in your focus. And then understanding who do we already know and have relationships with that are going to be best for us to solicit as well as cultivate. So again, one of the best places to start with identifying who our new and or prospective donors is with our current donor base. And on our next slide, Justin, we'll talk about, how you can really segment this and look at this. So what I would ask you to do, hopefully each of you have a donor database or something that allows you to keep record of who's contributing to you, how often, at what level, etc. And then allows you to really do some sort of cross-section analyzation. You want to look at your existing donors, so your current donor base, to determine who are your key and your high potential donors. These are the folks that, maybe have been giving consistently each month at a low level for the last 5 years, but have never really ever increased their gift. There might be opportunities to take them to that next level, again, with adequate and effective relationship building. But the focus here is retaining them and growing their relationship and their breadth of giving with you. So each of you should know what your average gift is. If you don't, I would love to have a conversation with you offline about what that looks like and how to determine what your average gift is. But hopefully you can run some internal reports to determine that. But with that, then cross-reference that with those that are currently in your existing database to see, okay, who's giving at that level? And if they're giving at 500 now, could they give it 1,000? Probably. If they're giving at 300, could they give it 500? Probably. So be looking at those opportunities and aligning it with engagement opportunities that align with the work that you're doing. Prospective donors, these are those that have the potential to be those key and high potential donors. And the focus here is acquisition and relationships. So these are the individuals that maybe attended an event and wrote you a check and you've never heard from them again, or they give to you consistently through Facebook donor platform, but you don't really know who they are. This could be $25 a month donor. This could be a one-time gift at any size, but these are the prospective donors that can be led into those high performing, high potential and key donors for your organization. So again, be looking at that low hanging fruit of who could be cultivated into a larger gift. And then the other segment of your donor base that you want to look at is your centers of influence, so your COIs. And excuse me a minute while I try to get comfortable in this seat. So center of influences are individuals and organizations that can help influence the giving of others. So these could be your board members, these could be your trustees or advisory committee members or longtime volunteers who already give and understand the impact of the work that you're doing, but can help bring others along. You want to be able to determine who those individuals are so that you can cultivate them in the long term. The other piece of, yes, Mickey.
Go ahead, finish your sentence, and then you can come back to me. I didn't mean to.
No, go right ahead.
Yeah, this is great stuff. I love the idea. You and I both think a lot alike on the identify piece, and I just wanted to add a little bit to it as far as, yes, identified by program services, but you remember first month of every year in January, we would always pull our donor list from the prior year, right? All of our giving, and we would segment our current donors by how much they gave in the prior year, and along with programs and services. So not only just the program service lane, but based on their prior year giving, segment them into key and high potential. But the other and most important piece about the list for everybody here, I think I was the only one that said I loved fundraising, and the other piece was the small office, right? Most nonprofits have small teams to do this kind of work. So it's super important to get the highest and best use and return of your time to work from list. I think initially when we start fundraising, we wonder, who should we call? Who should we meet with? Work these lists so you get the most out of your effort. Because again, time is the most limited resource we have. So when you're going to do it, work from list and be very strategic and very pointed in your effort So I just wanted to add that to it.
No, absolutely. And thank you for doing that. And I couldn't agree more. And I think the other element to this that we oftentimes overlook, especially considering everything else that we're facing day in and day out, is, um, I'm going to use some terminology that you may not know, but I can share the acronyms is lie bunts and C bunts as well. Lie bunts are last year, but not this year, which means they gave last year, but not yet this year. And sci bunts are those that gave some year, but not this year. And oftentimes we think, oh, well, they haven't given in the last year. They're probably not going to donate again. Or we haven't heard from them in 3 years. We're probably not going to get anything from them again. So we don't cultivate them. We don't keep them on our mailing list. We don't keep them on our call list. And oftentimes they stop giving because they either didn't see value or the ROI or the impact from their gift that they did make, or they weren't cultivated. They weren't continued to be a part of this process and the cycle to feel like they were adequate partners with you with the work that you're trying to achieve. So just be mindful of that, that even though somebody may have been a donor for years and stopped, doesn't mean that that's the end of the road for them. So finding opportunities to re-engage them as well, I think is immensely important as we think about this. So once we've identified who we want to kind of target, we have our lists and we're adequately working those, we move into the qualification stage. And qualification, you really have to, use the information that you have regarding these donors, what it is their interests are, their capacity to give, their donor history to really determine the type of donor they can become, analyzing their engagement with your organization over time, their giving history, etc. Like I said, most donor management systems can allow for a deeper dive on this. If you don't have a donor management system, we can provide some resources on those that might be beneficial and cost effective. There are some out there that are immensely expensive, but do a great job. But really, at the bare minimum, you should have a donor management system that allows you to really keep track of giving history of donors so that you have a historical knowledge of this. So as there's turnover or people change, you have that information, but it also prepares you as you continue to engage and cultivate them as part of your process. So quick question for you all. If you have someone who has been to multiple events but has never given before, how many of you think that they would be an adequate prospect to support your organization? Can't see many of you, but hopefully your hands you're shaking your head. They would be, absolutely. And if somebody's given to your organization consistently each month at the $25 level, but you've never met with them, do you think there's someone that you should maybe invite to lunch or to your next event to really get to know them a little bit better? Hopefully you're also raising your hand and saying yes. And like I said earlier, if somebody can give you 300 a year, their ability to give you 500 or 1,000 or whatever the next level could be is probably an opportunity for you. So be thinking about what opportunities are missed because you aren't really analyzing your donor base in a way that allows you to qualify who can give and at what level. So with cultivation, you've identified them, you've qualified them, and now you're going to get to that cultivation stage. I'm going to tell you, this is all about relationships. Cultivating donors, you have to commit to building relationships with them. And to move anyone from prospect to active donor, you must know the following: what motivates them to give, what gift opportunities best meet their short and long-term goals and the desires of the donor, and what giving meets when, excuse me, when giving meets the need or desire, the fulfillment builds donor loyalty. So building relationships with people takes work. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, it is the hardest part of the fundraising cycle and the donor cultivation cycle. But I will tell you, people give to people. Not only do you have to care about what you need and want, as part of this, you have to care about what someone else needs and wants. And a lot of times that's hard because we're there, we need to raise money. We know we have individuals that are relying on our services. So we just want to raise that money. We don't want to have to take that extra step and extra effort to really, get to know somebody who may or may not become a long-term donor of your organization. But I'll tell you, it's an essential piece of the puzzle in the process, excuse me, because if you don't truly understand what motivates someone else and what their needs and wants are, it's going to be really hard for you to identify ways in which that intersects with the work that you do. And I'll tell you that closing gifts is knowing the person more than you know your program or service. So while homework is essential to know what someone cares about, if you can't answer that, you likely won't raise the money that you could. And the reason that you should give cannot be because they're wealthy. And I think that's oftentimes a misnomer in fundraising is, well, we know they give to every other agency in our community. We're gonna take them out to lunch and hit them up. But if we've never established a baseline with them, they've never participated in any of our programming or services or an event or had an alignment to the work that we do, just because they have money doesn't mean they're going to give it to you. So again, remembering that fundraising is relational, not transactional. Next slide, and I'll go into a little bit more. So I'm going to give you like a kind of a cheeky example and be a little glib for a moment, but I think it helps kind of paint the picture and bring this full circle for you all. I'm going to kind of just quickly go through a question sequence with a potential donor, and I'm going to play both parts to really get to the end of why that is essential and why that piece is such a critical element to the cultivation cycle. So, hey, Mickey, thank you so much for meeting with me. You know, how have you been? I hope you, Audrey, and the boys had a wonderful spring break. Did you guys go anywhere special? Oh,
No.
that's amazing. Like, I love Mexico. Did you go to the same place every time? Oh, okay, that's really cool. I've never been, but I've heard amazing things. And remind me, how old are the boys now? Oh, and where are they in school? Oh yeah, McClay, that is a really great school. And, you know, I can imagine you guys are probably really involved there, right? Oh, you're on the board? Oh, how's that? I bet that's, you know, a ton of work and super rewarding. And remind me, how did you and Audrey meet again? Oh, in college at FSU? That's right. And you're both involved in the boosters too, if I remember correctly. And you live in Southwood? Yeah. Okay. Oh, and is that your boat? Okay. So again, like I'm being cheeky and that's not exactly how it would go. But what I want you to take from this is you have to take the time to ask these questions, because guess what I now know, because I've asked those questions. I know that Mickey and Audrey are probably, and this is not a true story, so don't think that this is. I know that Mickey and Audrey are probably out $32,000 a year because their kids go to McClay. And they're going to be paying that for the next 5 years. I know that they went to FSU and they're involved in the boosters, so that's probably an additional $15,000 that they spend each year. I know that they live in Southwood, and while I could go online and look at what they paid, I could probably get a good idea of what their mortgage is. And I found out because of where they go for spring break that they have a second home in Mexico. Oh, and that they have a boat, which quite frankly, and I love boats, so don't get me wrong, like that's funny money. Like that's discretionary income that they're able to spend because they have a boat. So what that allows me to understand is that their $1,000 gift that they give my organization annually is likely a starter gift. And what I should be doing is thinking about ways that I can identify for them to partner with us and our organization and invest in a more meaningful way. So I'm going to pause right there for just a second because I know that was a lot and I see some stuff in the chat. But how many of you, and you don't have a boat either. I mean, I'm trying to put these things in the universe for you so that maybe you do in the future.
I can just come to y'all's place. Y'all take me out on the boat. We'll be good. Yeah.
But how many of you, when you're meeting with a donor or, you know, a stakeholder, take the time to ask questions based on what you observe, what you may already know about that person, or just as part of, you know, really trying to identify who they are. Take the time to ask them questions that allow you to understand what's meaningful to them, just by a show of hands. And I say that, but I can't see hands. So hopefully you do. And if you're like, well, I don't know where to start, I don't know what questions to ask, let's meet. Mickey was essential in the work that we've done together at Southern Scholarship and other places to do connectivity and participation. kind of plan and outline that based on the work, the services and programming that we provided at previous organizations, really outline questions that walked individuals down a path to not only feel nostalgic about their experience with our organization, but really got them, um, in this emotional state so that when we came to the point where we made an ask, it, we could have asked for the moon and the stars and probably gotten it. So the way in which you ask questions matters. And I see
Gonna ask you, did you see Gwen's comment?
I didn't. I feel I do a great job at the conversational aspects. It is my follow through that needs work. And I appreciate that honesty, Gwen. I think that's pretty common. And we can talk a little bit more about what that looks like. But it's essential. And if you miss that or you wait too long, what happens? I mean, life happens. People forget about the conversation you had. They forget about that feel good in the moment. Conversation that you all are having that connected them with the work that you do. So it's important that, you know, you do it in a specified amount of time. So we can talk through that as well. Um, like I said, you can't skip any part of the donor cultivation process where you get the chance to understand what the donor values and cares about. How are you ever going to be able to tell them about your work if you don't take the time to understand what they care about? You want them to fund it, but you also want it to be a meaningful experience for them as donors. And again, you want them to feel like partners. You don't want them to feel like they're an ATM. Now, I'm going to provide a quick caveat. And this is just a quick caveat. There are times where you will have an unexpected ask, something that's outside of your annual giving program or capital campaign or event fundraising, whatever it may be, where you might actually have to just pick up the phone and be like, hey, look, we need to make this happen. We need to raise this today. And that is going to happen. But it's because of these relationships that you're able to do that and do it in a way that is, again, strategic and meaningful. And it doesn't, again, equate back to, up, here we go. Amber's calling me. She must need money again. And it's important to ask questions because the more you know about them, and you know what they value, the more you can help steer the conversation about your work in a way that resonates with them. So once you get past the get to know you phase, that's where you get into the fun stuff, like what makes them philanthropic at all, and is that a value that they wish to pass on to their children? And then be thinking about, is that something that your organization can help them fulfill or help them to be able to accomplish that? I think the other piece with cultivation and building relationships for me, and I'd love to hear from anyone else, is, this is a conversation. This isn't a cross-examination. It's not an interrogation. It's not an interview. Don't walk in there and tell them everything you know about them already. You don't get bonus points for having access to Google or knowing how to use it. The cultivation and relationship building phase is really about 75% of them talking and 75% of you listening. The better listener you are, the better you're going to be at closing the deal. And once you understand what they care about, you can share more about what you care about. And then again, how that aligns with the work that you're doing. But what I would caution you is, don't get too deep into the weeds because you will lose people. I like to use this analogy, like when I sit down with our financial planner for UPHS, I love him. He's a great individual. And I ask him, how are things? I'm looking for things are great or things are not great. But when he gets into this long description of how, the market is trending, my brain leaves my body and my mind starts to be thinking about, what time do I need to pick up my daughter from school? Because my mind just doesn't have the capacity to, think through that level of detail. So think of your donors in the same way. They don't have the capacity for that level of detail for your work. And if they want to know more, they're going to ask you the questions. The other thing that I'll share related to this in one of my previous roles, and this is not Mickey, I will say this for certain, is, I worked with a CEO who was not experienced in fundraising or development or relationship building. And I essentially had to work with him to understand how to talk to human people like a human. And I always joke, and we can laugh now about it. But it's essential because if you've never done it, like, it can feel very foreign or robotic. But they kept getting great donor meetings, but they wouldn't close any gifts. And I couldn't understand, like, where's the disconnect? Like, what is happening that isn't allowing us to get to the place where we need to be? So I said, I'm going to come with you and it's going to be great. And I don't know that he thought it was going to be great, but it was. So we're sitting there, we're getting, we're going through the presentation. And what I realized is he's giving too much information. Like, I started seeing donors' eyes kind of glaze over. And then after he would finish, after like 15 minutes, they would say 3 times in a row, like, wow, congratulations, like, keep up the amazing work, which is obviously not the outcome we were looking for as part of those meetings. And he couldn't understand what I was trying to say as it relates to building relationships. So I used the analogy of, you know, spaceships. I said, I love NASA. Excuse me. And I think it's absolutely incredible and amazing that we've been able to send a man to the moon. I said, but if you start to tell me the science and the math behind what it took to get that space shuttle to take that person to the moon, I can promise you I'm going to want to gouge my eyes out. Like, seriously, I'm going to want to do that. So we have to be cognizant and mindful in these meetings that too much information can also be a detriment and a barrier for getting people to give. And that's not how we want to tell people about our work. We want to tell them, what is the need? Like, what is the point of why we're here? How is it that what we do addresses that need? And why are we better equipped to do this, and to deliver these services as part of our work? And how can they help us get to the moon? That's the good stuff. If you're able to do that, you're probably ready to make the ask. So I know that's a lot specific to cultivation and relationship building. So I want to pause and I want to see, what concerns do you all have before we go into the solicitation, like the actual ask piece?
Amber, I'll just jump in real quick. I love everything you're saying, and I just want to remind everybody here, and some people I know really well on this meeting, and we've talked a lot about identify, plan, and execute, and C&P and all that. But what you're really underscoring is the importance of practice and preparation, and that everybody on this call that's listening to you today is willing to do things different, because this is the different type of face-to-face, consistent, proactive fundraising that you're talking about. And it does take time. Yes, it does take resources, CRM, but it primarily takes effort. And if you practice and prepare, you can get better and better at this. So please give yourself grace. If you're going to try to use a question sequence, if you're going to try to build these deep relationships, it does take time and it does take practice where you're comfortable in these conversations so you don't feel forced. So you don't feel like you're doing an interview. So it doesn't come across stiff. And it is a feeling that you get as you continue to practice, because I think all of us have been called on by salespeople before. So I'm sure you have experiences of those salespeople that come in and, they do the how's mom and them and the howdy doody call for a few minutes. And then out of nowhere, they ask you for something, right? They're not really interested in who you are and what you care about and where you want to go and where you've been. They just want to make a sale. So if you're going to do it different from that, you got to practice and you got to prepare. So give yourself grace. It will take some time.
No, absolutely. I definitely think the practice and preparation is so important. And thank you for underscoring that. I see your comment, Fadrina. We could certainly provide like boilerplate questions, but what I would tell you, and I think you came in after we started talking through this, is it's going to be very specific and nuanced to the work that you do. So while I or Mickey or anyone else on this call could probably give you questions that you could ask donors, it's really going to be based upon the work that you do and should be very tailored and strategic to the outcome you're seeking. So if that's something that you're looking to develop, we can certainly work with you as it relates to what you're currently asking, or build upon what you have. All right, so step 4 is solicitation, and I will preface this again, just like I did in the beginning with, I don't expect everyone to be excited about fundraising and asking other people for money. That's why development is it's a career path and an actual profession, and it's not a hobby. To cultivate donors, though, you have to be willing to ask them to invest. And we'll get to the second piece of that here in just a second. Natural good fundraisers love people. And I'll tell you, earlier in my career, in my life, I'd say in my 20s and my early 30s, I was more of an extrovert. I've become more of an introvert. Doesn't mean I can't still do the things that I did as a fundraiser, but it's not something that just is my prominent or dominant quality now as I get older. But naturally good fundraisers love people, and they love to interact with folks. They can and will talk to anyone. They find common ground with almost anyone. They're your friends that talk to people in the grocery store or in the elevator. They build meaningful relationships, and they're really good at keeping them, and they have a high tolerance for rejection, because we have to get used to that as part of fundraising. And we'll talk a little bit about how to address objections in a little bit. And I don't expect everyone to thrive in that role, but what I do expect is that if you're going to engage in the fundraising process as part of your organization, is that you respect the people and you respect the process and you do the work. If you at least follow this model or a similar model, you will be successful. And to Mickey's point, with more time and preparation and experience in doing this, you will get better and you'll see greater and greater results. I'll also say what I said in the beginning: when you reconcile your baggage around wealth and money and your just thoughts and feelings about that, and you're willing to commit to building relationships, that's when you know you're ready to make the ask. And the ask is oftentimes as simple as the phrase, would you consider? And you may think, what would you consider? It's seriously that easy. Would you consider becoming a monthly donor? Would you consider increasing your support to $100 a month? Would you consider investing in our work at the $1 million level? Would you consider does a couple of awesome things. First, it gives the donor an easy out. Like, they can say no without it being a yes now. And two, it gives you a second ask. Well, what would you consider? I mean, it's pretty good, right? And when you do this, you remember you're not asking for yourself. Like, this is not a personal favor. You're asking on behalf of the individuals that you serve and those that are touched by your mission. So be proud of the ask. It's an incredible part of the work that you get to do. And because you're in the position to be able to ask, you know the ripple effect and the impact that that's going to have on the work that you're doing and will do. But what I also mean by this is, don't walk into a meeting and say, well, we're not here today to ask you for money, because yes, you are. Like, that's literally why you're in the meeting and why you've asked them to meet for lunch or for coffee or come to your office or come to this event. Don't say whatever it is that you can do to help, because this is hands down the fastest way that you are going to get the smallest possible gift someone thinks that they can give you and get away with it. And don't take it back. Once you've made an ask, just pause. Don't say, would you consider giving to us at the $10,000 level? No, I mean, or 5 or 2 or 1, or you know what, you're really great. Like, go ahead, take the rest of the year off. Okay, thanks, bye. No, don't do that. You sell yourself, you sell your organization short when you do that. Ask the question and wait. Count to 10, breathe, smile, and give them the opportunity to tell you no. You are meeting with grown-ups. They can ask you questions. They can tell you no, but do not for any reason take back your ask in the moment. What is it? Bask in the silence. And it's awkward. I mean, we could probably all agree that you're like, you start sweating, your palms are sweaty. You're like, oh no, what if they say no? They might say no, and that's okay. You know how many no's you have to get before you get a yes? It's okay. And I would love to be in a position to where we don't have to teach people to make the case for something as important as feeding or housing or education. But unfortunately, this is the world in which we live. And if we're committed to doing the work and doing it well, we have to be committed to the art of funding this work as well as the art of executing it. So at its core, the art of funding this work means that you have to truly believe that the purpose and the privilege of the work is to provide people an extraordinary way to use their wealth to change people's lives. That's an opportunity. And that's what I want you to do when you look at approaching your donor cultivation now and in the future is how can I create pathways and opportunities for folks to invest in the critical life-saving work that we're doing. Now, it was a point on the last slide, and I want to focus on this because this is something we're seeing in the height of social media. We've seen it have adverse effects on organizations that we work with, and I want to encourage you not to do it. If you have a donor or donors that have given to you or haven't given to you, and they've said no, or they've said, thanks, but no thanks, or we can't do it this year, or we actually have to downgrade our gift, please, please, please. I know that can be frustrating. It can be disheartening. It can be deflating. It can feel diminishing. Do not put that on social media. Do not post, our biggest fundraiser is a couple weeks away and our largest donor just backed out. I can't believe it. What are we going to do? While that may very well be the reality of your circumstances in that moment, what you do is paint the picture that, oh, well, they were really reliant on that individual, but it shows that you can't be fluid. It shows that, circumstances can't change, and it shows that you don't have a relationship with individuals, because had a relationship been established with that donor that said, I can't give now, or I can't give this year, it could have created a conversation for, well, what does giving look like for the future? What it also shows is we're in a very small town. People are going to say, well, who's that? What donor are they talking about? And I can guarantee you, in the 6 degrees of separation, somebody can figure that out. And how do you think it's going to make that individual, that business, that organization feel if they know that they were publicly shamed online for changing their gift or not giving this year because of circumstances outside of their control? Or, maybe their budget is at a level that doesn't support giving in any shape or form. Be mindful of that. Because it can and will come back to bite you and or the organization long after you're gone. And it doesn't look good either. And I know there's probably some thoughts around that, and I'm happy to open the floor for conversation around that as well, if any, before I move into objections. None? Because none of you do that, right? Awesome. Who's laughing?
Nobody's going to admit that, right? Yeah, nobody's. It's just, maintain your integrity. You're good.
Yes, indeed. So objections, we're all going to get no. That is part of fundraising. For every, I think, 10 yeses you get, you're going to get like 50 no's. So prepare yourself for that. Like, recognize that not everybody that you engage with is going to give. But the way I like to look at it is, while it may not be a yes right now, a no is a not now. Doesn't mean it's not a yes in the future. So finding ways that we can keep them engaged in the work that we're doing and continue to cultivate them over time to where we can get them to a yes, as long as we've identified them adequately and they're qualified in a way that's going to align with the work that we're doing. But however, you have to anticipate objections and practice, how you're going to respond, acknowledge them and address them. And remember that no isn't necessarily no forever. It's just not now. So here's a few objections that, I can recall experiencing in my years of fundraising. You ask somebody to lunch and they're like, no, I'm not interested. I've been giving, to all these organizations for the last 20 years. And I really don't want to give elsewhere. You might be like, well, they don't know anything about me or our organization. So a potential response for that, and again, in the moment it could change, but just for sake of this conversation, for you to support the nonprofit community tells me a lot about you and your concern for our neighbors. Organizations like ours and others benefit tremendously from individuals like you. So respecting the fact that you're not ready to give right now, I would still love the opportunity to have lunch to just learn more about you and your giving goals, as well as maybe your organizational philanthropic priorities. There may be some additional ways in which we can partner that aren't financially related. So would that be agreeable to you? I got to know, I got told I don't want to I don't want to go to lunch with you, but I gave them the opportunity to feel very good about what they do for the community while also, letting them know I still value the fact that I want to build the relationship with them. I've also heard and experienced, our business is really struggling right now. Okay, hold on. Before I go on to that one, Priscilla, is it good to share who has given on social media in particular? I know, like, to share as a way to thank those. So yes, hopefully we'll get to it in the next few slides. We might run out of time. But there are some times that donors give and want to remain anonymous, and that's okay. So you need to know if that's the case. And if so, obviously you wouldn't want to publicize the fact that they gave in any capacity on social, your website, newsletter, etc. But it's absolutely warranted, and I think, should be a part of your stewardship plan as it relates to how do we thank and acknowledge our donors for the commitment and the contributions that they do make. So I think, again, that's going to be very specified to your organization, and based on the levels of giving that you have, identifying how and when you acknowledge donors and what that looks like. And it should look different for somebody who gives $25 versus somebody who gives 1,000. But you should absolutely do that. I think you could ask too, right? Is it okay to publicize your gift? And yes, absolutely. And if you're unsure, to Kim's point, ask, hey, this campaign was really successful with online fundraising. We want to really, honor everybody that committed and contributed to this. Would you be okay if we included you in our thank you post on social media? They can tell you yes, no, and you could do so based on that conversation. I'm going to skip the next objection just for sake of time and go into stewardship. We share on social and also send a thank you letter, among other gifts, depending on the gift. Yep, I think that's great. So the last step of the donor cultivation process is stewardship. So to cultivate donors, you have to keep them engaged while demonstrating accountability and impact of their gift. Practices that demonstrate accountability and impact of donors include, sending timely gift acknowledgments and those thank you letters, recognizing restrictions on donors' gifts. They might want it to be earmarked or spent in a specific way. Providing timely reports to your funders, whether that's private foundations or governmental entities, listing donors on your website or on social media, whatever the case may be, but really tying it back to the wishes of the donor based on that relationship you've built in a way that's going to be meaningful and valuable to them from an acknowledgement standpoint. But please, 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 make sure that you acknowledge your donors. The other thing I will say, I know there's a threshold that you're required to send a thank you letters, but I would encourage you to send a thank you note for every gift you receive, no matter the size. It could be the boilerplate language, but typically in my history, as well as I'm sure Mickey can share this as well, you handwrite it, don't use a stamp, and then write a little note, because people remember that, because not everybody does it. I can remember a number of instances with donor acknowledgement letters where we would sign it, Mickey would write a little note, I would write a little note as well. And then the next time we would meet or engage with that donor, they would say, you took the extra time to do that, even though like it was just a part of our process and like we did it weekly. Nobody else does that. And that means something to me. And you can imagine when they think about, okay, I have this additional discretionary income, or I want to make a significant gift at the end of the year, who's going to be top of mind for them? So doing little things like that matter as well. Part of stewardship, and we'll go into this just really quickly because I know we're running out of time. Donor intent, like I said, make sure that we understand the significance of restricted gifts. So if somebody wants it to go to a specific purpose, make sure we're doing that. But also set a policy for your organization about what gift acceptance looks like. You may come across donors that want to give you something that you can't benefit from. An example I can give you is we received a truck donation that we couldn't use, and then we had to salvage it and sell it at an auction, and like had no experience in that. And while yes, we were able to get it done and reap some reward from those proceeds, there was probably another organization that could have been better suited to receive that contribution. So as an organization, really thinking through the types of gifts that you will accept and are essential to advancing the work that you're doing, I think is important. And then managing your donors' expectations about what the nonprofit will or will not expect. And then if you're unsure the intent of the donor's gift, make sure that you clarify that, and ensure that it's, again, recognized in a way that's going to be meaningful to them. I will say, before I stop and not go into the, I think, last two slides, we'll send them out, and the information that's on them, I think, is relevant and will give you exactly what you need versus what I would say. Is if someone asks to be anonymous, you must maintain their anonymity. And there's a donor bill of rights that AFP International has. I would encourage you all to review that. It is on one of these slides, so we'll send it out. But if somebody has asked to remain anonymous as part of their giving to your organization, you have to honor that. And with that, I'm gonna pause because we are almost at time and would love to answer any questions you have. I'm trying to go back through. So Kim, I see your question about, does that include the 990? I would have to ask our CPA about that. I think the way that it's outlined on the 990 is more like a lumped contribution or income revenue line. It's not like Amber Tynan gave me this unless it's like a certain amount. I would have to double check that, but I think in the event that it had to be line item allocated as part of the 990, you couldn't keep it anonymous, but I'll get clarity on that because I've never had to file that myself.
Amber,
Yes.
it's Gwen. I deal with the 990. Oh, goodness.
Gwen, if you want to drop your comment in the chat, and I see Brian has a question.
I'm gonna put in the chat, it's about the 990.
Thank you, Gwen. Any tips for that initial icebreaker? Would a call or email be a good first contact? Thanks so much. So that's a great question. So what I would do first is, identify who it is you're going to call, and then, or who is on your target list. Utilize the resources you have at your disposal. So work with your board members, work with your volunteers, work with your staff, see if anybody has a relationship with those individuals to then help kind of make that connection so that it's more of a warm connection versus a cold one. So I would do that first. And if a board member knows this individual, I would say, could you make an introduction and, invite them to lunch to where we could all join together. If you don't have somebody that can help make that connection, I certainly think for me, a call is better than an email, but it really just depends on the individual and the way in which they want to be engaged. Some people do want to be emailed, some people do want to be called, some people want to be texted, some people you could Facebook message. I think it's really just figuring out who that person is and the best way to engage with them, and then looking at potentially two other circles, centers of influences, those that can help bring that individual along, especially if there hasn't been a long-term relationship with that individual and your organization over time. Okay, 990 can be done with information included for all donors, but you can have your accounting firm only disclose a public version that excludes the name. Yes, thank you. Yes. Mickey says avoid cold calls, emails. I would agree. There are some great approaches to prospecting that help increase the conversation rate of meeting requests. Of course, referrals are the best. I would agree. What is the best way to obtain fundraising for funds from public for an upcoming event next month? So when you say from public, I'm going to assume the general population, not like government dollars. So really, that's going to depend on the type of event that it is. Let's say it's a arts and autism event. I would look at who your partnerships exist with, maybe other autism focused groups, as well as folks that have donated with you before, and ask them to share the information on your behalf. Give them flyers, give them everything necessary to, again, promote the event that's taking place. And, say, hey, we're hosting this. We want it to have a great turnout. Can you help us share the message with your networks or those that you may know? And then say, if there's an entry fee, they can pay that here, or contributions are encouraged. I would definitely work with those that you have partnerships with, as well as your board and or your volunteers, to help spread the message, versus just putting an event out there without any real traction or alignment with other groups that can, again, help you spread the knowledge and the exposure and the awareness of the event that's taking place. I hope that answers your question. Okay. Any other questions? Awesome. Awesome, Kim. Thank you. Well, it's been a pleasure. Just to recap, we will send this PowerPoint out to you all. Resolve your baggage with money. Until you do that, it's going to be really hard to ask other people for money. People give to people. Remember, this is not personal. This is about how you advance the work that you do as an organization. Fundraising is relational. It is not transactional. Find ways to connect with people and align what it is they care about with the work that you do, and be authentic. If you are not authentic as part of this process, people will pick up on that. They'll wonder, where's the disconnect? And being authentic as part of this process will allow you to really, enhance and advance the work that you're doing and raise more money, quite frankly. So, I'm happy to answer any questions offline. Like I said, I love meeting one-on-one versus a setting like this. So if you want to have coffee with me or lunch, let me know. Happy to talk through what it is your organizations are doing. But at the very least, please commit to building relationships with folks and really being strategic and targeted in your approach for who you ask for money. We guarantee you'll have more success when it's aligned and rooted with a process. So thank you all. Thank you, Mickey. Thank you, everybody who contributed to the conversation. And Justin, thank you again for managing my slides.
Thank you, Amber, for your time, your expertise, and your treasure in sharing with our membership today. As stated earlier by Amber, we will email this out to all interested parties and attendees within this morning's session. We hope that you have a great rest of your week. The weather is to get a little bit dicey as the week continues on, so please be safe. Please have a great rest of your March, and let's kick in the Q2 with a bang. If there is no questions or comments from our team here at UPHS,
Conference filling up fast. If you haven't registered, catch the early bird before Monday.
That's absolutely right. We cracked 100 registrations today, so give it up, give it up, give it up. We're going to break that record again this year with this year's conference. But please register for the 25th annual conference this year at the Florida State Student Union. Corey Fuller is our keynote speaker. Early bird does end on March 31st. But if there is no more comments, we hope that you have a great rest of your week, a great rest of your day, and continue to do great things in our community as UPHS members.
Bye-bye.